All right, we're doing it live. I'm Stephen Baker. About almost 20 years ago now, I created RSpec, and I've apologized already. So I want to talk about where it came from. It has, there's a bit of history there, and it's been a bit of a journey. So, is this going to work? Oh, you bastard. All right. So, this is me. This is where you can find me if you want to start crafting your angry tweets now. This is Reflections on a Reluctant Revolution, a trilogy in 5 parts. So let's start talking about ancient history, because to know where these things come from, you kind of have to know where I come from. My first piece of software that I ever wrote was a hockey trivia game on Commodore 64 BASIC and then QBasic. It would ask you questions like, who's the best hockey player ever? And of course, the answer was Wayne Gretzky. And that's when I got my first bug report, because my dad played the game, and he answered Bobby Orr. And he wasn't wrong. And so I had to add that feature to my hockey trivia game. And it grew, and it grew, and I couldn't add features without adding bugs. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was 7 years old. And I became obsessed with, how do real programmers do this? How do people who do this for professionally, how do they do a great job? And it turns out most of them don't, and myself included. But I became obsessed with the idea of quality and where these things come from. So a few years later, when I was about 14 years old, cable internet was coming to the part of Canada that I lived in. And they would bring you how many people here have used the internet in the late 90s? All right, great. You probably remember this. They bring you a cable modem. They would bring you a CD with the drivers for the cable modem and a branded web browser. You would get Internet Explorer, Netscape Navigator, and the throbber would be branded for the cable company. And when they came to my house to install cable internet, and I worked for the cable company at the time, I was doing sales as a 14-year-old. They came to the house, and they would put the CD in, and they gave me a really old-ass version of Netscape Navigator, and I was offended, because this is in the browser wars when we were getting new versions of, not like Chrome when you get a new version every 6 hours, but back then we were getting new versions of Netscape Navigator and Internet Explorer every couple of days or every couple of weeks. And so they gave me this old-ass version of Netscape Navigator, and I thought, this is stupid. Why are you doing this? Why don't you just use this brand new fast internet to download my web browser for me? And so I cracked open Visual Basic and Visual C++, and I wrote a package manager that would install the cable internet drivers and then use the fast cable internet to download your web browser and install the cable company's logo into it. And I thought this was really cool, and I showed my boss, and I said, hey, look, it fits on a floppy disk. And he said, do you know how much it costs to make CDs? And I said, no. And he said, a lot. Please come to the office. And so I got on the bus. I was 14 years old. I got on the bus. I took a box of floppy disks with my source code. I printed out all the documentation that I wrote, because I knew I was going to get to be a real programmer. And that real programmer was going to look at my software and was going to tell me all the things that I did wrong and how I could have done it better. And I was going to learn how to do this and be a real professional. And so I got on the bus and I went downtown, and there was a meeting of all of 5 or 6 executives from the cable company. And I said, hey, I did this thing and it fits on a floppy disk. And they said, how much money do you want? And I said, I don't know. I was just hoping to meet a real programmer. And I really want a new computer, and so they gave me $1,000, I think, which I was a real programmer. It was the first time I was exploited. So I was finally a real programmer. So then, after that, on the internet, I'm sure you've all seen the cartoon, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. Well, on the internet, nobody knows you're a 14-year-old boy, or they better not. And that meant that I could find work online. And so I've been working in this industry since I was 14 years old, which is 26 years ago. And I've been obsessed with quality and doing a better job and figuring out and learning how do we do this better and how do we get better at what we do. I was also involved in free software. At one point in my life, I was the youngest Debian developer. I think I was a Debian developer when I was like 11 or 12 years old. I'm a Stallman loving free software hippie. And yes, I use a Mac. I'm complicated. My first sort of real job that I didn't do from home was in economic development. Economic development is the thing we do in a lot of communities in Canada where, especially when like a large industry has moved out or something, the government will put in an agency whose job is to sort of increase economic activity. And so when I was 18 years old, I did this, and I became like the local tech expert for the Annapolis Valley region of Nova Scotia, and I helped businesses get started, and I helped software companies get started, and when people had, we need to hire this many people, where do we do it? They came to me, an 18-year-old punk kid who'd never worked in the industry for real before, just worked from home, and asked for help. And I realized that a lot of those companies really needed help with quality, and I was studying it, and so I started teaching test-driven development, which was new. And I learned extreme programming. And there was this paper called XP for One, which I can't find. I haven't been able to find it since. But there was this paper called XP for One. And when I was working at the Economic Development Authority, I was learning about XP, and I was moonlighting and teaching it. And I'm really going way off the rails here because I have no access to my notes. So we're running here. So when I was teaching these classes, every time some arsehole would say, "You can't test something that doesn't exist, I am so smart." And I said, okay, you're right. The language that we use to talk about TDD doesn't accurately reflect what we're doing. TDD is a design activity. And I was reading about how do we give things new names and what does it mean? And I found this thing called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which basically says that you can change the way that people think about something by changing the language you use to describe it. And I thought, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fix all of these smart arses by changing the words we use to describe TDD. And I wasn't the only person that was thinking about this. There was Dan North and Liz Keogh and Aslak Helisoy, who I knew, were talking about behavior-driven development. And that was more of a higher-level activity, closer to the customer, but it was something that was really interesting. And so when I was teaching these classes, I created this thing. And because Ruby is wonderful and meta, I could say, I called it Describer RB, I think, because that's what you're doing. You're describing the way the software will work. And all I did was I aliased test unit and test case, and then I overrode the test case suite where it would find all the test cases, and so that it would find methods that, is that me? Sorry. It would find methods that start with should instead of test, and it would work. Maybe my hair's in the way, sorry. Okay, all right, cool. So this was the first version, and this is what a test would look like then, or a software description. And then I did the bad thing, and I'm really sorry. This was a mistake. It looked cool. It was easy to do. A lot of people really liked it. They were wrong. This caused possibly more maintenance nightmares in especially Rails projects in the early days than using MySQL or MongoDB. So on the last day of my class, this thing at the top, the Describer RB, was just a teaching tool. It was just a thing that I gave to the people in my class to prove a point. This is how this is what we're doing. We're describing the behavior that software will have. And by the way, on the last day, this thing that you got from me, that's just a toy. is just to prove a point. The X unit pattern is what we actually use to do this, and what we're writing are called tests. And so that was it. I thought I would never hear of this thing again. It would never leave the classroom. So, episode 2. Let's see. So I got contacted by a guy that we all know, and he was a hero of mine. And I think at some Agile conference or something, he saw this thing from somebody who'd taken my class. And they said, hey, this is really cool. This is how we learned how to do TDD. And so he got in contact with me, and neither he nor I can remember whether he emailed me or called me on the phone because he's old as shit, or I think it was actually he contacted me. He told a mutual friend to please tell Stephen that I said this, and I told him, you can't download it. You shouldn't have even seen this thing. And so, when one of your heroes calls on you to do something, you fucking do it. So the next thing was to give it a name, and you're going to learn repeatedly today that I really suck at giving things names. And so I thought I was going to call it Describer. It was already called Describer. And I thought I'd do the cool thing of the day, like Flickr, right? And this was still a way better name than what it became. At the time, Bob Martin was running around saying TDD is about specification, not verification. Specification, not verification. Specification, not verification. And I agreed with that, but I think as an elder of the internet who grew up, implementing RFCs, I thought that the word specification was kind of a reserved word, and we shouldn't use it in new ways. And so I didn't think that we should use the word RSpec, but who am I to argue with Uncle Bob? So that's where RSpec came from. So I have so many, and as we've been out, drinking and eating and whatever for the last couple of days, and when I met the organizers of the conference on Zoom, I have so many fucking stories I can tell. And this is one of my favorites. And at least 3 times in the last 2 days, somebody has said to me, wow, that's a great story, you should add it to your talk. And I'm really sorry, I'm probably going to go a little bit over. But RubyConf 2005 was RSpec's coming out party. RSpec was released in the summer of 2005, and I went to RubyConf in San Diego, and I didn't know that anybody was using it. There were no talks scheduled about RSpec. But it had sort of spread across the Ruby community like a bad virus, and everybody was talking about it. Everybody was talking about it, and everybody was using it, and I became somewhat of a small-time superstar at this first conference I'd ever been at. And I didn't really give a shit, except as I'm walking through a hall one day, this very large man, hey, is it my mic? Yeah, it is. Oh, all right, let's do this, sorry. Cool, you go ahead. All right.
Maybe it's a little bit.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, the beard gets in the way again. All right. Thank you. Sorry. So, I'm walking across the room one day, and does everybody here know Jim Wyrick? New Jim Wyrick. Fuck, I miss that guy. He was one of my heroes too. He should be everybody's hero. So, sorry. I was walking across the floor in between talks. I think I was going to get lunch. And Jim was a large man. And he was almost running to catch up with me. And he's a bit out of breath, and he said, Stephen, I really just wanted to ask your permission for something. I love RSpec. I love RSpec syntax. And I want to use it in FlexMock, and I just want you to tell me it's okay. And I said, it's just fucking syntax. Like, use whatever you want. And I was just so pleased that Jim Wyrick, who created everything that we've built all of our tools on, was talking to me. Oh, I'm missing a slide. Whoops. All right. So there was no talk about RSpec at RubyConf 2005, and Aslak Ellis always said, hey, everybody here loves RSpec, and we're talking about it. Let's go sit out on the second day, let's go sit on the pool deck and talk about RSpec and BDD and stuff. And everybody kept walking up to me, are you going to the RSpec thing on the pool deck? And I said, no, I already know everything I need to know about RSpec, thanks. And people kept, and as this was going on, the whole conference was there. It was the best attended talk at the conference. It wasn't on the schedule. It happened in between talks. And I was the only person that wasn't there. And so I figured, well, fuck it. I'm not going to sit here alone. I might as well go join the crowd. And you can see the skinny dude with very little beard and very little hair and the white shirt back to the camera. That's me. And a bunch of my heroes are in this picture. You'll see Nathaniel Talbot, who created the original test unit, in the red shirt. Red shirt on the white is Brian Merrick. Martin Fowler is in this picture somewhere, but he's obscured by somebody else. And so I was sitting there, and they were talking about BDD and RSpec, and Aslak was talking about it, and people kept asking questions, including this really grumpy English dude, who I didn't know. And he would ask a question, and Aslak was standing up the front, and I was sitting in the back, and grumpy English dude would ask a question, and Aslak would say, I don't know, Stephen, what's the answer? And I would answer it. And grumpy English dude would have to turn around in his chair. And at one point he said, pointed at me and said, can you go stand up there because I'm tired of turning my fucking neck? And so I ended up standing at the front of the room and talking about RSpec, which I did not go there to do. I didn't want to talk about RSpec. I didn't understand what the big fucking deal was because I don't use it. I do today. I didn't then. I'm now a user as of 2023. So that was how I got to meet Martin Fowler. So these slides are out of order, sorry. FlexMock, thanks to Jim, FlexMock is the official mock object framework for RSpec, even though RSpec has a mock object framework. That's not the official one because I said so. FlexMock is because Jim. So at RubyConf 2005, we also made it into a domain-specific language. I was talking to Joe O'Brien about DSLs, and he said, RSpec is perfect for a DSL, let's make one. And so we did. And later, the describe it pattern came out of it, but this was the first version of RSpec as a DSL. There's a great talk coming up about DSLs this weekend as well, so that I'm looking forward to. And this is how RSpec became a DSL. I still didn't understand why people liked it. I thought it was a really good way to turn off, your brain's preconceptions about testing and stuff, and learn how to do testing. But I didn't understand why people actually used it in production. I still don't. So, fuck, I wish I had my notes. Hang on one second. Got it. So, I was working in an ad serving company in 2005, 2006 when I wrote RSpec. Well, when I released RSpec. And I've already apologized for it. If you look in your ad blocking lists, you'll see the word red vase, which is an anagram for ad serve, because I'm really great at naming things. Because this was one of the largest ad serving networks in the world at the time. I think it was second largest. And it was written in Java, and it was really slow, so we decided to rewrite it in Ruby. And I went away to a conference or something, or a vacation or something, and I came back, and my colleague on my team had replaced all the tests with RSpec. I said, what the fuck, dude? So I was fixing a bug in one of the ad filtering classes, and one of the salespeople came down who was describing the problem. She had reported the bug to me, and I opened up the test on the left, production code on the right, opened up the test, and she was reading over my shoulder, and she said, oh, that's wrong. That size is wrong, and the filtering is backwards. I said, how do you know? And she said, because it's written in your document here. And I said, that's the test. And she said, oh, I didn't know that was code. I thought that was just your notes. And I said, no, that was the test. And that's when I kind of realized that maybe there's some value here in doing this in the communication, the customer communication aspect of having a DSL, right? And so, and I still think that's a huge value today, is that normals, can read the tests. But you know what? If you use mini tests like I do, and write them really well and nicely, then you can read them. Normals can read them too. So RSpec is consistently in the top 10 Ruby gems that people love. Not on my list of top 10, but consistently in the top 10 in every survey that's ever done. More than 75% of new Rails projects, choose RSpec instead of the defaults. I still don't know why. Every language has at least one RSpec clone. And I now use it, and I kind of like it. Mostly I use it because everyone else is using it, and so all the documentation you look at has RSpec examples, and so I can't run away from it. And I tried for a lot of years. So RSpec was a real problem for me because I wanted to build tools and software to help people and make people happier. And ideally, I want to build tools that helps people stop writing software so they can go play with their dogs. Because I really hate this industry. And I created RSpec, and I thought, you know what, this is not the last thing we're going to do. It's not even that interesting. RSpec is not interesting. RSpec is not important. What is important is, thank you, the describe it pattern, the DSL and the pattern. That's what's important. And I didn't realize in 2006, 2007 that I was going to be a one-trick pony, that this was the last anybody would ever see of me. And I knew that if RSpec was the last cool thing I did with my life, with my career, then my career was a complete failure. And that's how I felt about it for about the last 15 years. And it's not the last thing I created. So if you don't use RSpec, like a sensible person, and you use Minitest and you love it, you also use code I wrote, because I created Minitest mock. As long as you're writing tests in Ruby, which you should be, I'm ruining your life. So one of the reasons why I had such a bad relationship with RSpec was because I had terrible mentorship. I had a mentor at the time who, in the early days, was really good to me. He introduced me to people. He introduced me to Bob Martin. He introduced me to TDD. He bought me my first XP book. And when RSpec came out, he tried to take credit for it. And I kind of let him, because I thought, you know what, he created me, and I created RSpec, so he kind of created RSpec. And he kept trying to put me down and take credit for what I did, and it was kind of an arsehole. And I'm not going to tell you his name. And if I did, you would say, who's that? And so I guess I won. I didn't have a vision for RSpec because it was just a teaching tool. I left RSpec in 2006, 2007, like a year or two after I released it, because I didn't have a vision for it. It was a teaching tool. It was supposed to help people learn about how to write tests better, and it did that. And I'm very proud of that. But I didn't have a vision for what was supposed to come in the future. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. And when people reported bugs, it was like, why are you doing that? Why are you even using this thing? So I wasn't teaching TDD anymore, and this is kind of amusing. In 2008-ish, 2006, I kind of wound down teaching TDD, because in 2008, I was completely done. I have the opinion that anybody who's not doing TDD in 2006, 2008, the information's out there. The information's out there, the knowledge is out there, the books are out there, the tools are out there. Anybody who's not doing it is willfully ignorant. They're deliberately not learning how to do this wonderful practice. So fuck them, I'm not going to do teaching anymore. And I didn't need RSpec because I wasn't doing teaching. And I was afraid. I was afraid that I would never do another thing. I didn't want to be known as the RSpec guy. Now I'm, as my hair turns gray, I'm happy just to be known at all. But at the time, I didn't want to be known as the RSpec guy. I didn't want to be known as a Ruby developer. And I spent the last 2 years doing TypeScript. Fuck, I wish I was a Ruby developer. So I didn't want my focus being dragged into RSpec land preventing me from doing the next great thing that I was never going to do because I'm a washed-up has-been. And so 2007, 2008, my final contribution and the best contribution I ever made to RSpec was to hand it over to David Shalimsky. And he was the lead maintainer for a decade, I think, until 2012, when other people who I don't actually know now maintain RSpec. There may be RSpec maintainers in the room right now, and are there any? No? Okay. I wouldn't know. I have no idea who the RSpec maintainers are now. My name is in the copyright statement on the README, and that's basically it now. So I sort of did this already because I wasn't looking at my notes, but was RSpec a success? What do people here think? Was RSpec a success? Okay. I'm not sure. Maybe it was successful. Everyone uses it. It's been cloned everywhere. In 2008, I was in Portland, Oregon. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit. I emailed Ward Cunningham and said, hey, want to go get a beer? And he said, yep, I'll be there, Green Dragon. See you there. And Ward is awesome. I got to meet some of the best people in the industry and had absolutely nothing to do with RSpec. It's because I emailed them. And I say, hey, what's up? And Ward came in and opened up his laptop and was showing me like swim lane testing, and we were pairing on something. My phone rang, and I picked it up, and it was my daughter. Hi, Daddy. What are you doing? Well, I'm having lunch and a beer with Ward. Who's Ward? I said, well, he invented the wiki. And she was 6 years old, and she said, does Wikipedia send him a check every month? And I said, that's a great question, I'll ask him. And I hung up. And Ward said, what are you supposed to ask me? So my daughter wants to know if Wikipedia sends you a check every month. And he closed his laptop lid, and he put his arm out, and he put his arm on my elbow, and he looked deep into my eyes, and he said, Stephen, I'm going to give you one piece of advice that I wish somebody gave me. Don't forget to get rich. I forgot to get rich. That was about 15 years ago. I also forgot to get rich. So now I'm giving this advice to you. Don't forget to get rich. So RSpec came along at the right time. We knew what TDD was. XP was, had been described, and it was out, and people knew what XP was, and we knew what TDD was. And we've been doing TDD as an industry in small parts of it for long enough that we started to see the pain of, some of the problems of TDD and the things that we don't do very well. And, so RSpec was perfectly timed. Not by, not for any reason or deliberate action on my part. I got lucky. It was the right time. People were looking for it, and it was there. It was the right place. The Ruby community was the right place for it. RSpec would not exist if it wasn't for Ruby. It's been cloned in every other language now, but we needed to do it in Ruby first, because Ruby talks about expressiveness. Ruby talks about making people happy. There are two perfect languages in the world, Lisp and Smalltalk. Absolutely perfect. Something is perfect when nothing can be removed. Those are the two perfect languages. Every other language is a compromise, including Ruby. Ruby just happens to be the best compromise. Lisp and Smalltalk say, I'm perfect and I don't want to interact with the rest of the world because the rest of the world is imperfect. And Ruby says, I'm slightly imperfect too, and so everyone, let's all get together in the same room and make a mess. And I love Ruby for that. And Ruby was the right place for RSpec. And Rails was the right time and place for something like RSpec to take off, because the one thing that Rails gave us was convention over configuration. If we learn nothing else from Rails in the future, it's convention over configuration. And by convention, you got a test directory. And when you generated scaffold, you got tests generated for you. And so people who'd never heard of testing or TDD before would generate a new Rails project and see, hey, what is this folder called test? Oh, the documentation tells me to type rake test. I'm going to type rake test. Maybe I should go and learn more about this testing thing. And so Rails introduced a whole bunch of people to testing, and RSpec helped them understand how to do testing better. It was the right people. This community is the right people. Some of my best friends in my life came from the Ruby community. And I don't know that many people in this room, actually. It's pretty great to come back, and it's, there's so many people I've never met before. I got a lot of failures, too. I'm going to go through this quickly, because I didn't have my notes. I'm running way long, I'm pretty sure. So we're going to go through this one. My first Rails app wasn't a Rails app at all. I replaced Action View with GTK. Because I built a web app, and then the guy said, oh no, this can't be a web app, it has to be a desktop app. And I said, oh shit. Okay, so I just took Action View and made a GTK front end. Didn't release it. I made a restaurant app. I made an app recently, in the last couple of years. It used Git as the database and JSON, because I wanted it to be infinitely scalable, and it was for like putting a restaurant to put a menu online. And I took it to a nerd club, and one of the nerds said, well, that's not web scale, bro. Nobody's going to use this. And I said, you know what, fuck you. And I went home and I deleted all the code. And that'll teach this guy that I've never seen before or since. And when I rage quit a project, and I've done this many times, I delete it from my hard drive, and then I go through my backups and delete it from the backups too, so I make sure I really did it. I'm a stubborn prick. The cool stuff I've done is in artifact generation. I really suck at naming things. I think that we need user manuals. One of the things that I'm working on right now, and I am going to release it, is I'm calling it living documentation, thanks to my friend Perry, because he's good at naming things. We're going to write a user manual, put the tests in the user manual. The test suite is going to generate the user manual. Compliance documents. We did credit card compliance and stuff that way. And flipbooks for design review. When I do Rails apps, the designer gets from the test suite, gets a screenshot of every screen, and they can take a look and see which things are wrong. Codalytics is another one that I wrote, went to sell it to a client. It was basically like Code Climate, but before Code Climate existed, and it was better. Went to a client, and the guy said, oh, can I use this thing to tell me how many commits each of my developers has? And I said, yeah, sure. And then he said, can I use this to see how many lines of code each of my developers is writing? And I said, yeah, sure. And then I realized what he was asking me, and I went home and I deleted it from all my backups and never tried to sell it. So how do you limit failure? Extrinsic motivation. RSpec exists because one of my heroes told me, this is cool and I want to see it out in the wild, you have to release it. So that's what I want to say, that's what I want you all to leave here with. Whatever you're thinking about, share it. Write the blog. Write the tweet, email me, email somebody. Get your ideas out there. Don't delete them. Don't delete them from your backups. Don't run away from the things that you're creating. Create new things and share them. What would make your life easier? Create it. Scratch your own itch. You want to do something, do it. And I want to be, if you built something, release it. I want to be that person for you. Somebody I trusted and respected said, this thing that you built is great, please release it. Some people in this room might trust and respect me for some reason. I'm telling you, I want you to take the thing that you're working on and release it. Send it out there in the world, and maybe it'll be really big in a way that you don't understand. Maybe people will use it and you don't know why. And so I want to be there for anyone else who wants to do these kinds of things. If you want to, what's it like to release a Ruby gem? What's it like to build a community? What's it like to build a thing that people use? What's it like to walk away from a project and see it live on after you're done? Send me an email. I want to help you with these things because I had help with these things when I was coming up. Just ask me. And ask the people that you trust and respect. I got to have lunch with Ward Cunningham because I emailed him and said, hey, I love your work. You've really made an impact on my life. Can I take you out for lunch? And he said, hell yes, will you pair with me? When Kent Beck was in town one time, I emailed him and I said, hey, I saw that you're in town. Can we go get a beer? I've met all of my heroes because I sent them an email and said, you've done great things for me. Can I do something nice for you? Can I take you out for beer? Can I buy you dinner? Can I, can I just let you know that you've done something for me? And I got to meet all the great people. It's amazing. So just ask. If there's somebody whose work you love, ask them. Tell them and ask them, can I just let you know? Or, you've done this before, can you help? Most people will do that. I want you to create things and share them and do it all over again. Because that's what I wish I had done more of. I ran away from RSpec because I didn't want to be a one-trick pony. I'm a one-trick pony because I never released anything else. And I'm going to steal this one from Tim Apple. I can't wait to see what you do with this encouragement. I can't wait to see what comes in the future of this community and what people are going to release and where Ruby is going to be on its 40th anniversary. I can't wait. So thanks for listening to me.